Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV. I thought I would do an update on my printer buying guide because I'm seeing some changes in the industry. We're seeing a lot more of these tank printers coming out at lower prices, along with a lot of other subscription options as well. So we're going to dive in and see what all of your printer options are now. Let's get to it. So let's start off with a fundamental question. Should you choose an inkjet printer or a laser printer? And there's no easy answer to this question, but for me, I have found laser printers over the years to be the more economical choice. I don't print all that often. I usually print one black and white document a day and maybe print out something in color once or twice a month, if that. And what I like about laser printers is that they can sit for months or even years, and when you go to print to them again, as long as they've got toner, that document is going to come out pretty much perfectly. On an inkjet printer, the longer they sit, the more clogged up they get, and you have to run multiple cleaning cycles to get the print heads cleaned. And over the years, I've had inkjet printers get so clogged up I couldn't fix them, and I had to buy a new one. So if you are printing very infrequently, a laser printer, either in black and white or color, will likely be the less aggravating choice. But if you are a frequent printer and are frequently printing color documents, then an inkjet printer might make a little more sense, especially now that we have all of these tank printers available to us. Let's take a look at some of the pros and cons of each. We'll start with the inkjet printer here on the left. Inkjet printers are much better for printing out photographs. In fact, you can print photos right onto glossy paper, most of the time borderless like this one, and some of the photo inkjet printers with 6-color inks will even rival what you might get out of a photo lab. So they're very good for that. The hardware on inkjets generally costs less, but your per page cost, especially black and white page cost, is often significantly more than a laser printer costs because of the price of ink. But as I mentioned, inkjet printers are not great for low volume printing. You really do need to keep printing to them to keep everything flowing properly. On the laser side, laser printers can be a lot faster, especially some of the more expensive ones. You get much sharper text and business graphics on a laser printer, but again, they don't do as well with photos. And the color laser printers do really nicely with charts and graphs and that sort of thing. Laser printers tend to cost more for the hardware up front, but the page cost is lower because generally the toner cartridges have a lot more capacity. And of course, you don't have the clogs and the cleaning and all the other stuff you have to deal with there. Now, if you're still not sure which printer to look at, let's take a look at the cost of ownership. And one of the key factors in calculating how much a printer costs is page coverage. Now, what I mean by that is how much of the page that you're printing is going to be covered with ink. Now, most printer manufacturers, when they're rating a cartridge for how many pages it can spit out, think of page coverage like this document. And although we've got text here, most of this piece of paper is not printed on. But on the flip side, you've got something like a photo printer here, where every inch of that page has some ink droplet on it. And this is where you can run into some significant discrepancies between what they're promising insofar as how many pages you can get versus what you actually get based on the coverage. If you're printing out photos, a cartridge rated for 200 pages might only give you 50 or less, depending on the size of the photo and, again, how much ink you are using to print those photos out. So if we look at, for example, this very inexpensive HP inkjet printer, this was the least expensive one I could find on Amazon. You're looking at $50 here, but the replacement ink cartridge costs $35, and you only get about 100 pages in color with a coverage similar to this. You might get maybe 30 or 40, if that, photos coming out of this thing if you are covering the entire page. So even at minimal coverage, you're looking at 30 to 35 cents a page, with the ink costing almost as much as the printer itself does. Now, on the laser side, things can get a lot less expensive. So the least expensive HP black and white LaserJet printer I found cost $130. The toner costs $50, and you'll get about 950 pages of this kind of document here, and your cost per page is only 6 cents. So again, if you're printing very infrequently and you're only printing in black and white, the laser printer can be a much more economical choice. Now, the least expensive color laser printer I could find was this one from Brother. It sells for $300, and the toner replacement costs almost as much as the printer does. But look at the cost per page, only about 21 cents each. And that is a lot less expensive than what you would get out of a cartridge-based inkjet printer. And you're not going to have to deal with the clogging issues if you're not printing all that frequently. So although the cost to replace the toner is steep, over the long run, the cost of ownership here, especially for infrequent printing, is significantly less. Although on a color laser printer, your black and white prints cost more than they do on a regular black and white laser printer. But we can get into some more details about laser printers in a standalone video. But there are now some things happening in the industry that reduce your ink costs. Specifically, we've looked at a couple of these tank printers recently, but there's also subscription options available to you now as well. But let's begin with the tank printers because every major manufacturer now is selling some form of tank printer. And these have a higher cost of entry because you're not having a printer that's subsidized by your future cartridge purchases. But the cost of ownership overall is lower, especially if you're printing high volume, because the ink is so much less expensive. But these printers have lower quality print mechanisms and print quality, at least for the more affordable ones. So when you buy like a $90 or $100 printer, you're going to get pretty much the same mechanism you'll see in that $50 HP printer we were looking at a few minutes ago. But there are now some nicer quality tank printers out there, like the Epson one you saw earlier that can print out those large photos. You do get, in most cases, a year of ink in the box, and the bottles of ink are generally not all that expensive to purchase later. Now, the page counts, again, assume average coverage here, and there are some hidden long-term maintenance costs, and each of these printers has their own issues. So, for example, the Epson printer here has a sponge that absorbs excess ink, and that sponge has to be replaced every so often, and it's not something they let the user do, even though it's really easy to do. You have to send the printer back in. I think the cost is about $50 all in to get that sponge replaced. The HP printer here has to get its print heads replaced every once in a while. I don't have a cost for that, but it does require service to do that, at least here in the United States. So you will find yourself having to do some kind of maintenance on these over time, but still the cost of ownership should be lower than a cartridge-based printer. Now, if we look at just the raw page cost here, the HP ink replacement for these bottles of ink is about $66, and they promise thousands of pages. What's interesting is they don't actually give you a number. Most of the manufacturers don't. They usually say it'll last you a year or more. But the safe yield, I would say, is probably around 5,000 pages or so, and you're looking at basically a penny and a half per page. And even if I'm off by double here, even at 3 cents a page, it is still a lot less expensive than a cartridge printer, and it's a lot less expensive than a color laser printer might be. So if you're printing out color frequently, I think these tank-based printers are an excellent value because your cost per page is so low. Even the black and white cost is a lot less expensive than a regular cartridge printer and rivals that of a laser printer as well. But you have some other options if you don't want a tank printer, and that is to go the subscription route. I know some of you might be rolling your eyes over this, but it is less expensive. So let's step through how these subscriptions work. So most of the major manufacturers now offer a subscription plan for supported printers where you pay a monthly fee and your ink gets delivered to you as you need it. And everyone does it a little differently, so we'll look at that in a second. It is better, I think, for low volume printing because your cost per page, as you'll see in a minute, is significantly less than having to buy the cartridges each time. You can benefit from the lower cost of entry of a supported inkjet printer and also have a lower operating cost. And these work on a per page basis and do not take into account the coverage. So if you get, for example, HP's Instant Ink, you get 200 or 300 pages a month that you can print. And if you're printing out 300 photos, your cost is no different than if you're just running a text document like this. They don't look at the coverage. They just look at the pages insofar as what you're allocated each month. So let's take a look at what HP's plan costs. Their lowest cost plan is $1 a month, and that assumes 10 pages per month of printing. And you can see how it escalates from there. And the printer does need to be on the internet. And what they'll do is send you new cartridges as you need them once the printer decides it's running low. But as you can see here on the moderate plan at $6 a month, your cost is only 6 cents per page. And that's irrespective, again, of coverage or whether or not it's black and white or color. So a lot less expensive than buying the cartridges outright. They also have a rollover allocation. So if you don't use all 300 pages per month, for example, in the frequent plan, you can roll over 2 to 3 times the monthly allocation depending on which subscription you have. So you can bank up pages if you need to. If you go over, you will have to pay $1 for a set of 10 to 15 pages. And again, it varies based on what plan you are on. Now, Canon has the Pixma plan, which on a cost per page basis is pretty competitive with what we saw from HP. They don't, though, have a high volume plan available. There are some rollover options there too. So for example, if you're in the moderate plan, you can basically roll over 100 pages per month, and it varies based on which plan that you're on. Brother has their refresh program, and again, it is pretty much the same on a cost per page basis, and you can roll over 2 times your monthly allocation. Your overages are sold as sets of 10 pages for $1 each. The least attractive one that I've seen so far is Epson's ReadyPrint, where you pay a monthly fee, and that includes the printer. But once you're done with the 2-year commitment, you're likely going to have paid for what the printer would have cost anyhow. So I think Epson needs a little bit of work on their subscription offering, because at the moment it doesn't feel all that competitive with the other ones. So if your printer is sold with a subscription option, I would try it, because I think you're going to save a good amount of money versus having to buy the cartridges each time you run out. And of course, the printer will order you new cartridges as needed, so you don't have to worry about ever running out again. And many of the printers that you'll find these days have some kind of promotional offer. So for example, right now, this HP printer is going to give you 3 months of free ink. You basically get a 3-month trial to Instant Ink to see how it might work out for you. Just remember, the printer has to be connected to the internet at all times. And if you cancel your subscription, the cartridge that they sent you stops working. So just keep all that in mind. It does save money, but you will have a monthly commitment to keep those pages going there. There are laser versions of the subscription plans through some of the different manufacturers. HP and Brother, I think, offer those. The cost per page is a little less competitive versus the ink side of things, but do the math and figure out whether or not it works for you. HP recently started doing a paper plan in addition to the ink plan, where they send you ink and paper as you go. So lots of options out there, and I do think it's worth considering because it is less expensive. Now, what about generic ink cartridges? And I think generally you could do okay with them, except the fact that the manufacturers are working very hard to prevent you from buying generics out there. So HP, of course, is notorious for that. There were some reports of Brother disabling some features on their printers if you use non-genuine toner. If you go out and look at toner cartridges, for example, I saw this one on Amazon for an HP printer that had no chip on board, and they give you instructions for taking the chip out of an existing HP cartridge and installing it in this one. They say it's easy to do, but it sounds like quite a lot here. So it's a DIY kind of thing. Now, I have a Lexmark printer, and I've been using a generic toner cartridge in there for the last couple of months, and it's working fine. I got this one from Print Save Repeat, and I was so ticked off because my Lexmark printer ran for years off of the toner cartridge that it came with. That's how infrequently I print on it. And I did a firmware update on the printer, and suddenly that toner cartridge, which came from Lexmark, was declared non-official for some reason, and I couldn't use the printer until I got another cartridge. I was so ticked off. I went with the generic, and it's been working out just fine. But your mileage will vary, and I found this article from Consumer Reports that I think you should read just to get a feel for what you might run into out there, because there's a lot of fly-by-night generic ink cartridge and toner cartridge manufacturers, and Consumer Reports doesn't even rate them because they pop up and disappear so frequently. So you should do some research to make sure what you're buying is going to work with your printer and not damage it, because these printers are designed around the ink that the manufacturer makes. So the thickness of the ink, the color of the ink, how the cartridges work, all of that is assumed by the part of the manufacturer that you're going to be using their parts rolling forward. And many of you have had great experiences with third-party ink cartridges. Consumer Reports did a survey where most consumers had good experiences, but there are times in which you could get a bad one that might damage your printer and warranty repair won't cover it. So just keep that in mind. Shop carefully, do some research, see if you can find some reviews out there. Most of the articles that I looked up on generic ink cartridges were often written by manufacturers of generic cartridges as well. So again, do your homework and buyer beware, because your mileage might vary on the generics. But I've had good luck with the one that I'm using on my Lexmark printer. It did save me a good amount of money, and I'll likely buy another one when that one runs out. So that'll do it for this printer buying guide, at least for now. And what I would love to hear from you down in the comments section are some things you'd like me to talk about in the future. Maybe I missed something. Maybe there's some experiences you've had that you might want to share. All of that will be helpful, because I am sure we'll be revisiting the topic of printers once again in the future. And until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Brian Parker, Budley, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Steve Green, and Amda Brown. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.